great guest this morning. And I did want to just remind you to go to my website and download Make Your C Suite Stand Out on LinkedIn, which is a free tip sheet that we provide with great tips about making yourself more visible on the LinkedIn platform. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce and welcome my guest for today. Her name is Kat Kennan. She is a best-selling author, disruptor, and marketing powerhouse. As CEO of Radical Customer Experience, she's leading the charge with empathy-driven, inclusive marketing solutions. Her company, RCX, is the force behind BV Score, which is AI driven, psychology based customer insights. She's proudly certified as a disability and woman owned business. Welcome, Kat. Great to see you.
Good to see you too, Julie.
So, I thought we'd start by having you share a little bit more about your backstory, how
Sure.
you got into this field, and how you got started.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my journey into customer experience and marketing started way before I knew that that's where I was headed.
Right.
I had a early job at Estee Lauder Corporate, supporting the head of sales for the Americas, and obviously was exposed to strategic DMA decisions and hand in hand with marketing and Market Week. And that really drove my love of brands and customer experience. I remember back then occasionally getting a phone call from a customer that somehow got through to me, right? Somehow got through to the office and would be like, "You discontinued this shade of lipstick. My life is over." And I mean, I understand that very well, right? And uh, what would you do? What would we do? It was bringing the best to everyone you touch was always our slogan, and we did. I'd call the manufacturing plant and I would say, send me every shade you can of that lipstick, and then I'd send it to the customer with a handwritten note. And so,
Wow, that's
yeah.
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And so, my formal move into marketing didn't come until, I don't know, 7 years later. But those early experiences really cemented for me what marketing and what customer experience should look like.
Wow, that's a pretty powerful story. And I wish I was that customer. I think you probably made her brand loyal for life after that.
Yep.
So I read somewhere that 70% of customer experience leaders are rethinking their entire customer journey. Why do you think that is?
I think that customer experience, the way it's traditionally been viewed, is just going from the wrong perspective. And I think most leaders recognize that something's not working, but perhaps aren't sure what. And so they're rethinking and perhaps don't know which direction to go. When I think about customer experience and the current metrics that we're using, such as Net Promoter, customer satisfaction score, it really is brand to customer, right? We're looking at our metrics and asking very specific questions that suit our metrics. Well, that's not customer experience, right? That's brand. That's brand to customer. If you're really driving customer experience, you're starting with the customer and going back to brand.
Well,
And yeah, and the great thing about that is, maybe contrary to popular opinion, like, how do I do that? How will that affect my metrics? Is it still increases business, it increases loyalty, it makes your brand stronger going forward, um, and is the only way that customer experience can move.
well, that begs the next question. And because we talked a little bit before the show went live, why do you call Net Promoter Score or NPS a relic?
It is a relic, and I think sometimes I've been known to use stronger language. But one, let's just start with the science behind it. Any kind of polling, which perhaps is particularly relevant this morning, needs at least three, sadly, needs at least three questions to be scientifically valid, right? That's something I didn't know, until the last year or two. But NPS is one question. Would you recommend us to a friend, right? And more than that, NPS ignores the entire middle of the spectrum, right? It views nines and tens, and it essentially views ones and twos, and much of the middle is just completely ignored. So
Wow.
that's one. And then, I don't know about you, but I get that. Would you recommend us to a friend once or twice a day? And
I do too.
yep, and we all do, right? And whether we're marketers or not. And I don't know about you, I choose a different number depending on what my experience with that brand has been in that given moment. And so, how is that even scientifically valid if it's kind of meaningless? It could change from
Right.
moment to moment, right? And there's a lot of scholarship about this that, there's really no connection to long-term results from Net Promoter.
So is that one of the things that is that one of the reasons why you would say that CX is currently kind of broken and going in the wrong direction?
Yeah, absolutely. And, there are other metrics, like I mentioned earlier, whether it's customer satisfaction or customer effectiveness. I think that they're all well intentioned, asking one or two questions. But again, how fast are you responding to a customer? Is that really the question that we're talking about? It's how do you make your customers feel? Do they
Mm,
feel like you care about them?
right.
Do they feel seen and heard?
Or do they feel ignored?
Yeah. Can they trust you? Right? Those are the questions that we have to ask. And they're tough questions, right? It's like, do they trust you as a company? Like, I think as, bad a rap as marketing can get, right? For the most part, we're all well intentioned, we're good people. We don't sit around conference rooms coming up with campaigns thinking about how to ruin a customer's day. Right?
I hope not
I
anyway.
hope not. Right? Even the most like misfired campaigns where, it's like, how in the world did they come up with that? And, and think it was okay. And obviously there are always egregious examples, but still no one was sitting around a room saying, let's mess with people. Let's upset them. Like that's not realistic.
So I think you answered my next question. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit about what does customer experience really mean in today's climate?
Yeah, absolutely. It is that, how do you make your customers feel? And it is about inclusivity, but that means a little bit something different than how we normally talk about it. It doesn't mean that you're inclusive of absolutely everyone. It means being inclusive of everyone that's relevant for your brand. And it can be little things that, what size models do you feature? What sizes do you carry? Of course, that's a piece of it, right? But
It could be your
uh,
return policy.
yeah, it could be your return policy. Absolutely. Yeah. And some of those big brands, Amazon comes to mind, has completely flipped their return policy,
Yeah,
right? And
right. They're making it more difficult now.
yeah, and to customers' detriment, right? Um, if we're not putting the customer first and thinking about how they feel, uh, we're making a mistake, right?
I just had an experience recently where I bought something off where else Instagram,
Yeah,
and which is like, just sucks you in, and I end up buying things there sometimes from brands that are kind of unknown. So it's sort of, I'm taking a chance,
yeah,
and I got something and it wasn't, the quality that I expected. And I wanted to return it, and it cost me so much money to return it that it totally turned me off from the brand. I will never shop from them again.
yep.
And they have nice other merchandise. It was just this particular item, I think, that just wasn't right. But it cost me so much that it really put the kibosh on that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And we never forget those examples. I know I have so many, and it's like brands that I will never forgive. And,
You
constantly tell
hold that
about,
that grudge, right?
yeah, right. And that's one where airlines frequently come into play. But, also here and there, like surprising customer experience where I'm like, wow, they really see me, right? And, and those are the ones I definitely share as well. And sometimes feel like that particular brand should be paying me because of how often I tell that good story, right?
It's true. You could be one of their ambassadors.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's another reason why they should be doing things like that and keep the customer top of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it ties into the influencer game, right? So often it's, about a celebrity or someone with a huge following and they're getting paid, right? Now, deserves to get paid. However, it's not based on a true customer experience. Always not 100%
Right.
true, but mostly true,
Right.
right?
They haven't gone through the whole journey.
Yep, absolutely.
So, what is strengths based marketing and how does it go a long way to, really create positive customer experiences, Kat?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you asked. So I think um, maybe it's easier to talk about the opposite, which is fear-based marketing.
Okay.
And the reality is that when we send messages that are creating this urgency, right? That it's limited quantity, limited time, you have to keep up with the latest influencer, which is, today's keeping up with the Joneses, right? Dating myself a little, but uh sending out those kind of messages is really detrimental to the customer, and we're bombarding them constantly, like every single message we send out, whether it's Instagram or X or or Facebook, advertising, emails, um, and that causes damage over time. And there's a lot of scholarship in the psychology space of how damaging that can be. So flip it, right? You want to create urgency. I think the holiday season that we're fast approaching is a good example of this.
Oh,
Well,
I was seeing holiday decorations
yeah,
3 weeks ago. It was crazy.
yeah, yeah,
Every retailer wants to inch up a lot this
yeah,
year, it seems.
yeah. It's sometimes it's like they're up before Halloween, it seems. But I think thinking of the holidays, that last 6 weeks of the year is usually over a quarter of the revenue, right? And
Sure.
so, as that brand marketer, it's like we have to be urgent, right? But the reality is that you can use positive examples. Like when we see, those emails or messages, like these are our customer favorites, right? That's strength based marketing because you're not saying you better get it while the sale's on,
Right.
right? There's something different there. And, I use the word strengths a lot. It bleeds into something I sometimes call trauma informed marketing, which, when we bombard the customer, usually at specific times of the year, and holidays are a great example. Whether it's end of year holidays or Mother's or Father's Day, not all of us have pleasant associations with those things. End of year holidays, it's family, and family's difficult. Or with Mother's or
Right.
Father's Day, maybe someone's lost a parent or are estranged from them, or vice versa with their kids, right? And
Or maybe
so,
it's swimsuit season and
yeah.
maybe,
Oh, yes,
that
absolutely.
just conjures up a lot of body image issues for
Yeah,
people.
absolutely. Or, I hadn't thought about this before, but a colleague brought up to me 4th of July that, for people in recovery, that can be particularly difficult,
Yeah.
right? All the commercials are about, enjoying things, with an adult beverage. or seeing and or hearing fireworks. Noise is really upsetting for a lot of people. I happen to be one of those people. But think about it. You log into your email and, sometimes you get 3 or 4 emails in the day from the same brand, sometimes more.
Yeah,
Every
it's a lot.
post, every single commercial. Don't forget mom. Don't forget dad. Don't forget, right?
And then there's all the mail that you get, the
Yeah.
hard copy, the mail that
Yeah.
you get every day it's even
Yeah.
more.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really upsetting. I mean, I know I lost my mom a few years ago, and Mother's Day still is not a happy time.
Yeah, it
Right?
could be a very fraught time for many
Yeah.
people. No,
Uh,
I get that.
yeah. Yeah.
So, what is the role of, because employee experience plays a big role, I think, in customer experience. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. I think they're pretty much one and the same. Um, it's your internal customers versus your external. But when customers or when employees rather, they feel seen and heard. They feel like they can trust you. They feel like you're putting your money where your mouth is. Then they go on to be happier employees, more efficient employees, employees that, um, you know, when they're relating to customers, have an additional level of empathy because they feel like, as a brand, as a company, you're empathic or empathetic towards them. We have a blog on the website now where customers write into us with their experience.
Oh, how great.
Yeah. Yes, please, please, for any of those stories, whether positive or negative, please submit it to us, because we will grade and we'll come up with a response. But someone wrote in recently, I know I talked about airlines earlier, about a JetBlue flight to Central America, and the flight attendant spilled water all over them, and
Oh,
which would be terrible anyway, right? But what made it even more egregious is that the flight attendant didn't even acknowledge it, right?
oh my goodness. Wow.
And then it gets better because, or worse, because later in the flight, the same customer actually um, went to the flight attendant to get water to drink this time, right? And, was also ignored and like had a big sigh, like, the customer was being, the flight attendant was being really inconvenienced. And, our response was thinking about it is, um, yeah, that behavior never excused, right? But, it brought about the question is, do the flight attendants feel seen and heard, right? Or do they feel like the airline doesn't care about them?
Right. So that
Because,
comes out in how they treat customers.
yeah,
That's very interesting. Um, I,
yeah, absolutely.
whenever I am dealing with companies online, because we make so many of our purchases online now, or even by phone, um, we're all being impacted by the use of artificial intelligence, by AI. How do you see that as impacting CX?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like a lot of new tech that comes about, it's like it can be used for good or evil, right? Technology is just technology, right? There is no intent behind it. It's, about the users and understanding or misunderstanding. It's not even the users are like, yes, let's be evil today, right? Um, I hope not, at least. But I don't know. We need some levity, I think, today. But uh, it is something that's not going away. It is something that is going to impact us sort of forever going forward, and is a huge part of customer experience. Like, can you treat, make those models learn empathy, or should be careful of how I say this, but can you train that model to um, look like they have empathy, right? And show that the company policies behind it do have empathy, right?
I have this all the time with there's a program. I'm a LinkedIn expert, and there's a program I use to measure LinkedIn metrics called Shield. It's an app,
Yeah,
and I think they're based overseas somewhere. And every time you ask a question, you have to interface with a bot. The bot often doesn't have the answer, which is a
yep,
problem. And then they won't get back to you until like 24 hours later.
yeah,
So that has just caused me so much angst and frustration,
yeah.
um, that I'm ready to move on to another platform as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had similar experiences recently with my email marketing system. You know who you are. But, where brands or companies that were really well known to have amazing customer experience and be right on it, and you would chat with a human being right away, they'd answer right away. Didn't matter what kind of account you had, that they would go above and beyond. And that's no longer the case, right?
You'd think that, but you'd
Yeah,
think that would be one of the first things that small companies would invest in, because that's
yeah,
how you build that loyalty.
yeah, absolutely. But technology is expensive, right? And it's definitely a barrier to entry for up and coming brands. But there are ways to do it in a low tech way, right? How do you respond to emails? How do you respond to messages
Yeah.
when there's just maybe a handful of you, right? Um, it's how do you choose to set up the company? What are your root beliefs, right? Um, and then as you grow and perhaps as you get funding and what as startups are all hoping for, right? Is we want to sell in 5, maybe 7 years, maybe less. And there's a lot of outside pressure, but does that change your DNA of a company?
Right. You have to really abide by those core values that you set up the company around, and
Ab-
make sure that you carry out those values at every juncture.
Absolutely. And if you don't, your customers don't trust you,
No.
right? And when we talk about trust at RCX or BV Score, we call it acknowledging and apologizing. So if you make a mistake, do you admit it, right? And if you apologize, do you mean it? And so when we go back
Ah,
to like, right? When you go back to, maybe an egregious campaign, Zara comes to mind. We're coming up on the year anniversary of that campaign. How else do I put it, right? Um,
well, maybe you could elaborate just a little
yeah,
bit for people
yeah,
watching.
yeah. So 2 months to the day from the Gaza conflict breaking out, they put out a marketing campaign that showed the model sort of in a white dystopian scene. And she literally had a wrap body over her shoulder. And it really looked exactly like the scenes that we're seeing from Gaza. Are you and their way of apologizing or
And this is not
acknowledging
the first time Zara has been,
was,
yeah, it's not the first time Zara has been totally tone deaf either.
yeah, absolutely. Apologizing was, we're sorry people were upset, and these are all the reasons it's not our fault. So, as a company, even if you think we're not at fault, we didn't mean to upset people, and that's your gut, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
No, take ownership of it.
Yeah. And we've seen other examples, like, what was it, 3 years ago, where Walmart put out Juneteenth ice cream, right? And I'm sure sitting around that room, it was well intentioned, I hope, right? But it's fundamentally misunderstanding what Juneteenth is.
Right.
And, you know, triggering this huge group of people, millions upon millions, billions of people, right? So, huge backfire.
So interesting. Wow. Well, Kat, thank you so much for being with me here today on PR Patter. Really appreciate your great insights on customer experience. How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Head over to bvscore.ai. You can always grab me on LinkedIn, just Kat Kennan, easy to find, um, or email me, kat@bvscore.ai.
That's great. And everyone else, if you like what you saw today, head over to wantleverage.com and download my free tip sheet. Make your C suite stand out on LinkedIn. I'll see you